Welcome back. Time for our royal roundup now. King Charles has become the first British monarch to address the German Parliament. Much of what he said was in actual German, which he seemed to be very comfortable with and most familiar with. He ended up with a standing ovation. TalkTV's royal editor Sarah Hewson joins me. So really, it's going incredibly well, isn't it?
Wunderbar, I think is the word for it,
yeah.
Vanessa. So far, day two, and what we've seen today is the centrepiece of this entire visit.
Yes.
King Charles making history, addressing the German Parliament, the first British monarch to do so. He gave a speech, as you say, switching seamlessly between German and English. Spoke of the vital leadership the two countries had shown on Ukraine, the two biggest donors within Europe to Ukraine. And he also talked about that special bond between the two countries and what it had meant to his late mother.
Friendship meant so much to my beloved mother, the late Queen, who often spoke of the 15 official visits she made to Germany, including her 5 state visits. The first of those in 1965 came when our continent was still deeply scarred by war and the trauma of conflict. Hers was the wartime generation, and like my father, the Queen had served in uniform. That my parents' 11-day tour of Germany should prove to be a pivotal moment in the reconciliation between our nations was therefore a matter of great personal significance to them both.
It was a very well-received speech. He talked about his own personal family connections. Yes. He made his first visit to Germany when he was 13 years old. Last night he was presented with a photograph of himself as a young boy with his father, Prince Philip, on that visit. There were laughs as well in the speech. He referenced comedy and music. He referenced the Beatles and Kraftwerk and Monty Python. He couldn't resist a mention of the Lionesses' victory over Germany in the Euros.
Good for him.
As well. I think that's his second one. And as you were discussing with Ian at the start of the programme, also this famous British film, not famous in this country.
No one's ever heard of.
So Dinner for One. That got another mention today.
Right, so if the listener missed my conversation with Ian was marvelling over the King's mention of this film, Dinner for One. And he said Dinner for One, and it absolutely brought the house down. And the Germans were rolling about, laughing, clapping, with tremendous appreciation. So the King had obviously been brilliantly briefed to put this into the speech. That didn't mean that any of us had the faintest clue what he was talking about. So it's a little bit like Norman wisdom being worshipped in Albania and nobody really understanding except the Albanians who absolutely adored him. It's a little bit like that, isn't it?
Apparently,
yes.
Vanessa, this is the most rerun TV show of all time in the Guinness Book of World Records. I'd never heard of it. I've now done my swatting on it. It was a comedy sketch from the 1960s. It was originally written for theatre, and there was a German producer who was in Blackpool scouting for some material, and he saw it being performed, and he managed to persuade the 2 actors in it to do it to a live TV audience in 1963. Then in 1972, there was a gap in the TV schedule on New Year's Eve in Germany.
Yes.
So they played it then. It proved such a hit that it's been a fixture every single New Year since then.
And is it in English? Is it 2 English actors?
It's 2 English actors. It's about an English aristocratic woman who is dining at a table set for 4 people, but all her friends have died.
Right.
So she's sitting there by herself, and her butler, James, then proceeds to drink everybody's drinks for all 4 courses and gets more and more drunk and trips over the tiger's head rug. Right. I guess it's kind of slapstick, farcical
it sounds
comedy.
Absolutely awful. It sounds dreadful.
And yet it is
unbearable.
played every single New Year on German television. And the King referenced it again today, and he said, perhaps when he was talking about shared culture, it wasn't the best representation of modern Britain.
But who writes his speeches? How much is he involved? How many of the cultural references are his own? I must say that the clip that you showed when he's talking about the importance, the significance, the delicate nature of his parents' visit, when you think of it, just 25 years after the war ended, it was all very recent. recent when he says our continent was scarred by war.
And the trauma.
That's a very vivid way and a very, very kind of a piercing way, really, of remembering the most, dreadful time when there were so many losses on both sides, and, how much hostility and hatred was kind of bubbling between the nations. And when he made that part of his speech, it feels as if he's absolutely targeting just the right people with just the right phrases in just the right way. Really, le mot juste, but that would have been better for the French. But so how much of it is him? How much of it is script writers? How much of it is people advising him?
Oh, he has a very close eye over all of this. He has real attention to detail. He writes a lot of his own speeches, Vanessa. And actually, you talk about those references to the trauma of World War II, and tomorrow's going to be a very much more sombre day because he's going to be in Hamburg and he's going to visit the memorial to the Kindertransport, 85 years on from 10,000 Jewish children being led to safety. And he's also going to visit a church that was bombed by Allied forces. So I think there are two things on this visit: looking back on the past and shared histories, but also looking forward, as he described it, to the unwritten chapters of the future.
And these really are sort of overtures and relationships that it's very difficult for politicians to make and sustain, aren't they? So this is what you call soft diplomacy, but we can actually see it playing out here. And you can see from this how important and how valuable actually the monarchy is. And people who doubt it and think we'd be better off as a republic ought to listen to that speech and watch the way he's doing it and the effect that it will have, and it seems to be having, and see how very valuable it is.
And it was interesting in that clip that we played where he talked about his parents' visit being a pivotal moment in relations. And actually, we're also at a pivotal moment now, post-Brexit, resetting those relations between England and Germany, and should have been England and France as well, had that trip not been postponed. That, we understand, will probably take place in early summer after the coronation and when things have settled down in France. But this is all about a new era, a new phase in the relationship between these European economic powerhouses.
Let's talk a little bit about last night and the Queen.
The banquet.
I can hold up a picture of her here. She is on the front of the Daily Mail. They say she's looking radiant. She was wearing extremely significant, unbelievably valuable, very, very glittery diamond jewellery and a hell of a dress as well.
Less is more was not the motto.
Definitely
last
not.
night.
More was more.
More is
and
more.
And the dress packed a hell of a punch as well. So tell us about the jewellery, because that was an historic kind of legacy type wear, wasn't it?
Yes, it's only Camilla's second tiara-wearing moment since she became the Queen Consort, the first overseas. That is the honeycomb boucheron tiara. It belonged to the Queen Mother. It was given to her by an English aristocrat. Then it was passed to Queen Elizabeth II. She was also wearing the late Queen's diamond fringed necklace, which you see very prominently. And on her left shoulder, she's got the Queen's family order. That's given to ladies in the family by the late Queen Elizabeth. She was wearing the Grand Cross, which was presented to her yesterday by the German President, and the Garter Star, as well as that black and silver Bruce
a hell of a lot of
dress.
stuff, isn't it, for one woman to wear all at once?
I imagine she was feeling pretty weighed down.
Yes, and huge earrings as well. So massive tiara, this vast, incredibly heavy diamond necklace, all those different insignia, the earrings, and then a dress which was hardly under-embellished itself by Bruce Oldfield.
I know, pulling out all the stops, as we've seen in Germany, and the King also in white tie for that banquet. It really was a glittering affair. And again, last night we heard the King speak in both German and English as he addressed those at the Schloss Bellevue.
And do we think that actually they will have been enjoying themselves, that this will have been an incredibly important role, and yet actually Charles is very much a fan of classical music, particularly German composers. They will have loved the food. They will have had a good nosh up over there. I mean, it will have been good fun as well, do you think?
And actually, you mentioned German composers. He talked about Handel today in his speech and said that will be ringing out in Westminster Abbey come May the 6th at the coronation. I think they will be very much enjoying themselves. He certainly looks like he's enjoying himself, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And I think they'll be buoyed by the response, because you can't predict these things. You never know. And there will always be a little bit of anxiety about what kind of reception they might get.
Yes.
This being their first
Especially
overseas
following
state
Brexit,
visit.
which might have been considered
Brexit.
a slap in the face by the Germans, who might have thought we'd inconvenienced them and really taken up a great deal of their time and effort.
And given how much the Queen was revered and
Yes.
the big shoes that he has had to step into, but I think they will be very, very pleased with the reception that they have had so far.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We'll